arrive at waypoint 1. However, we did hear the call that we will not be stopping at waypoint 1 today. There's always the option there if we wanted to stop at waypoint 1, and that brings us up and in front of the International Space Station, puts us on the docking axis, meaning we are right in front of Node 2, which is our docking port today, also known as Harmony. We actually had a really cool view earlier when we had that shot from Dragon, where you could see Crew 8's Dragon at the zenith or space-facing port of Harmony. So hopefully, as we get closer, we get that view back. But once we get to waypoint 1, like you mentioned, we will start moving into waypoint 2. And if you look on the left of your screen, you can see Dragon changing color just a little bit. That was an orbital, let's see, sunrise? That was the delayed view of an orbital sunset. So they are now in an orbital nighttime, flying about 260 statute miles over the Atlantic Ocean. They'll be crossing over Africa soon. And if you see all those little colorful dots on your screen, not the ones on Dragon, but all those other little specks, that is due to radiation hits on the camera. So those are not colorful stars in the background. I wish they were. That'd be very cool. But that is actually just a little bit of damage to the camera itself from being in the space environment.
Of course, the colorful dots on board Dragon are actually a pullover from the aviation industry, being used to indicate the port and starboard sides of Dragon itself.
Acoplándose a la Estación Espacial Internacional. Todo salga bien.
We've talked a little bit about the, obviously, Dragon Freedom docking today with Crew 9, and then the Dragon with Crew 8 that arrived and is at the zenith port of the Harmony module. But there are other visiting spacecraft on the space station right now. Those include the Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft, launched just a couple of weeks ago and brought up 3 additional crew members. They'll stay on board for about 6 months. We also have 2 Progress resupply spacecraft. Those are also from Roscosmos, Progress 88 and 89. Those are resupply spacecraft. They come up with food, fuel, any materials or hardware for the crew living and working aboard. And then we also have Northrop Grumman's Cygnus 21, so their 21st flight to the International Space Station. That's another resupply spacecraft bringing up cargo and hardware.
Getting views still of Dragon as it approaches the space station here on your screen, fading a little bit as we head into that orbital nighttime.
We have
Houston Station on 2 on the big loop, 10102, step 3. We are ready for docking.
Houston copies, and at waypoint 2, Dragon will hold for approximately 5 minutes.
Station copies.
Ya no se ve.
Call in step 3.
Ya sé que no se ve. Ya sé que no se ve la Cruz
Houston
Dragon. Sí.
That sounds like NASA astronaut Matt Dominic. He is monitoring from inside the cupola. That is our window to the world aboard the International Space Station. So almost all of the photos that you see taken by our crew members are taken from inside the cupola, and that also allows us to monitor the arrival and departure of spacecraft like Matt and his colleague, Mike Barrett, are also a NASA astronaut, are doing today. So we did hear the call out that they will hold at waypoint 2 for just a few minutes and then proceed in for docking. And good news that the station side is go for docking today.
Yeah, that's really exciting to hear, especially because we have been working through all of these methodical, careful steps in the lead up to this docking effort. About 20 meters away from the station's docking adapter, Dragon's approach is going to slow in preparation in part for that hold, and it will begin to align itself with the docking adapter to come in for that final approach.
Now we did get confirmation that we have passed waypoint 1. Again, we're going to hold at waypoint 2. The waypoint 2 is about 20 meters from the International Space Station. So you can hold longer if you want to. We're going to hold about 5 minutes today, but you can hold longer if you want to, if you wanted to wait for better lighting conditions or just reconfiguring anything on either Dragon side or station side. But 5 minutes is a pretty short hold just to make sure everybody is ready for that final push in for docking. And then like we also mentioned earlier, we'll have one last call out in that time frame, which will be CHOP, and that's the crew crew
las
hands-off
cámaras de la
point
isla.
happens about
O
2
sea,
meters
esta
from the
internacional
International Space Station,
se
so
perdieron.
very close. And that means that if we needed to, if Dragon needed to back away from the space station at that time, it would not be executed by the crew. It would need to be executed by Dragon itself. So an autonomous retreat. And all of Dragon's flight has been autonomous from all of its burns and its rendezvous and its docking itself. It'll be completely flying on its own. Now, this view on the right side of your screen from Mission Control Hawthorne, they have been on console for the last 26 hours, actually almost 28 hours now, monitoring the flight of Dragon up to the International Space Station just a couple of hours ago. We heard that big loop configured, meaning that Hawthorne, Dragon, the International Space Station, and Mission Control in Houston are all able to talk to each other.
Freedom SpaceX on the big loop, self-capturing extension complete. Reminder, we will be holding for about 5 minutes at waypoint 2. If you'd like, you can keep your visors up until we are getting ready to command into approach 2 out of that hold.
El mítico sonido del Apolo 11.
Freedom copies. Good self-dockings.
Ahí están hablando la Cruz Dragon. Están hablando. 12 minutos acopla.
And just to let you know, we are station's pretty dark in the center line camera, looking at thermal until we get in closer.
SpaceX copies. Sounds good. And yeah, expected for the lighting conditions and eclipse now. Should brighten up in approach 2.
Yo pensaba que no era el rescate de la tripulación de la straliner.
Dice que después de 1 hora y 56.
Good confirmation there from Mission Control that we obviously have our Crew 9 astronauts suited up and waiting to approach that waypoint 2. We also heard the call out from Mission Control there that the astronauts are welcome to leave their visors up. One of the things that's pretty cool about the IVA suits is that they are fully integrated and tailored to the astronaut who is wearing them. So the visor is one of the only mobile parts of the suit. Everything else is connected. The helmet, the gloves, the boots, everything is custom tailored to the astronaut wearing that IVA suit, including everything going on to their communications with the ground, the umbilical that actually mates from the thigh of the suit to the chair on board of the Dragon spacecraft.
We did also hear that the soft capture ring is deployed. So there are sort of 2 phases to docking. There's soft capture, that's our initial contact for Dragon and the International Space Station. And then that ring will retract once we make that contact, and we'll start getting hard capture. That's when we get into those locks or those latches and hooks driving to provide a firm, secure connection from Dragon and the International Space Station. We'll also see some umbilical checks and connections as well, too. And we are standing by as well for a go, no go poll in Mission Control Houston. We may not hear it here, but we will have a go, no go poll from Mission Control Houston in just a couple of minutes for the docking. But it's good news all around so far. Heard that the astronauts aboard the International Space Station are ready for docking themselves. So we're standing by for waypoint 2 coming up next. We may dock a little bit early today. We were targeting around 2:30 Pacific. That could happen about 2:26 p.m. Pacific time. So early is good. Early is good.
That's great. One of the other things we're hearing as we hear chatter back and forth between Mission Control are these beeps as comms begin, both outbound and inbound. Those actually date back all the way to the early days of human spaceflight and are known as Quindar tones. They used to effectively be radio signals that we had comms coming in and out. They're a holdover these days. They're not strictly necessary, but because they are part of the history of human spaceflight and a really convenient way for us to manage these communications back and forth between Mission Control and the astronauts, you can hear them on all of our crew launches on board Dragon, and obviously keeping us in touch not only with Dragon and Mission Control here in Hawthorne, but also the International Space Station and Mission Control Houston.
It also helps us know when that comms is coming here as communicators, because those are the most important comms of the day. Anything we say is much secondary. It takes a backseat to anything that you can hear from the crew members in orbit or the team members here on the ground really leading the operations. So we like to listen for those, and we are quick to be quiet as soon as we hear that there might be some crew comms incoming.
It also just sounds like space to me. I think it's the history of everything, and having seen it on all of the crew flights from Demo 2 to Crew 9 on board Dragon, that sounds like we have space coming in. So always eager to hear what the crew or Mission Control has to say.
It looks like we're about 90 seconds away from waypoints away from the space station. We are already on the docking axis, so we are right aligned with the Node 2 forward port, that Harmony forward port that Dragon will be calling home today.
And because of that, we are getting these views of Dragon with space in the background on that dock.
La Estación Espacial Internacional. ¡No! ¡No! De la IS. Yo creo que por mal internet.
Access instead of the Earth behind it. So if you are just joining us, we don't have a super knots at about 2:26 p.m. Pacific time.
Digo 8 minutos queda.
That'll begin with that obviously soft capture followed by a hard capture. During the hard capture maneuver, Dragon will actually extend 12 hooks into the international docking adapter to make sure that we have really tight contact between Dragon and the space station before we begin pressurizing the vestibule between the two vehicles.
And again, we do expect that docking today will probably take place in darkness. Unfortunately, we love those views when we are in an orbital daytime, but like we mentioned earlier, we see 16 sunrises and sunsets a day, so we see about 45 minutes in darkness and 45 minutes in daylight. Right now, we are in one of those orbital night times, flying 261 statute miles over the country of Togo. So we are standing by again for waypoint 2 arrival. We expect to pause, and it looks like we can see a couple of thruster firings as we get ready to execute that 5-minute hold at waypoint 2 before moving in for final approach and docking to the Node 2 forward port with Dragon and Crew 9.
This is the second Dragon that's going to be mated to the International Space Station. Oh, we've got some good Draco pulses on your screen there right now. Again, this is the second Dragon that's going to be on board the ISS once we've got this docking complete today, because we do have the Crew 8 Dragon also currently mated to the International Space Station. Crew 8 and Crew 9 are going to do an active handover here, where the crews work together to transition current operations on board the station, any ongoing scientific research, and then Crew 8 will return home in about a week, depending on weather conditions, in the same capsule that they rode up on. So it's interesting because that capsule stays with the crew for the duration of their mission, which obviously means that we at SpaceX here are monitoring Dragon throughout the mission, from its initial launch, the entire time it's at station, through that splashdown for each crew.
Did just get confirmation that we are holding at waypoint 2, so we may hear a call to the crew in just a moment, confirming that as well. Again, expecting maybe a 5-minute hold, 20 meters right now away from the International Space Station. It's truly slow and steady wins the race. With that 5-minute hold, we talked about maybe a 2:26 p.m. docking, a 2:30 p.m. docking. It's nebulous a little bit at this point. We just take the time that we need at this hold, and so we may be back a little bit closer to the 2:30 docking. But we will make sure to let you know exactly where the International Space Station and Dragon are flying and the time of docking as soon as that happens. So this is the final hold in the mission before we welcome Dragon and Crew 9 to the station itself.
This really is a dynamic phase of flight, too. Part of the reason that we're monitoring these things and listening in on mission control is that we have a lot of teams working together to assess the situation as it unfolds. So the good news is that we've had a really smooth flight so far for our Crew 9 astronauts who did lift off yesterday from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. They spent about 28 hours on their way to the International Space Station. And as Leah mentioned, we are holding here at waypoint 2, just about 20 meters away from the space station, awaiting that final approach and docking.
Currently, Mission Control Houston is conducting their poll to ensure that we are going for final approach.
Point, retreat, and breakout are not permitted. And Freedom SpaceX, we are resuming approach.
Team copies.
Ah, este no se muestra nada.
Dice que ahí cuando se esté más cerca el True Dragon.
Hay alguno.
Ahí está.
Ay, aquí hay otra.
Son estrellas. Un montón de estrellas. A ver, este que digamos.
Station Houston on Big Loop. Dragon is on final approach and is...
Ay.
Hearing our Crew 9 astronauts
Ahí está.
on board Dragon.
Ahí está.
That
2
we are
minutos.
go for docking. If you're watching
Espera 2
closely, you're
minutos.
also seeing some great pulses from those
Dragon
Draco
blocks
thrusters on board
is.
as Dragon approaches the
¿Dónde están esas cámaras?
ISS for that final docking maneuver.
¿Dónde están esas cámaras?
No sé dónde las.
Again, that was the final hold, and we heard the
¿Por una página
communications
web?
that we are go
O
for
tal
docking
vez
and
por la
have
página web
resumed
de
that
la
approach.
NASA.
So we will not hold again, and they
O por
discussed
una app de
CHOP,
streaming.
which we mentioned earlier, the crew
No
hands-off
sé.
point. That's within 2 meters from the International Space Station.
Station Houston on the Big Loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. Monitor per steps 5 and 6 in 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Station copy, step 5 and 6.
So those sound like similar communications, but
Okay.
the first was to the crew on Dragon. The second is to our crew monitoring in the cupola, and you heard them reference what they should be looking at, any procedures that they're referencing during this dynamic phase. And we're continuing to see Dragon get closer to the International Space Station, now about 17 meters away from the docking port. Again, we do expect to be in an orbital nighttime during
Uy, ahí está.
this is
Ahí está, tenemos las cámaras. Tenemos las cámaras de la Dragon.
And focusing on the docking port itself. So it looks like we are properly aligned with that node 2 forward port as we continue to approach, now just 15 meters away.
Sistema de acoplamiento.
Seeing good real-time readouts on your screen there. Just in the upper right-hand corner, you can see our LiDAR geometry, indicating how close we are to the International Space Station.
Sí, es esto.
LiDAR, of course, stands for Light Radar, and it is used in maneuvers like this in space to help two spacecraft meet each other.
And that helps us to not need daylight when we are executing these maneuvers. So again, I mentioned this is happening in the dark. We can hold and wait for different lighting conditions if we needed to, but because we have this LiDAR technology, we're able to continue moving in. And like you mentioned, Ronnie, if you look in the top left, you can see we're now just about 10 meters away from the International Space Station.
Es esta cosa que es como cuando llevas un enchufe argentino y lo llevas para Europa. No, no está compatible, entonces necesitas un adaptador. Es como eso, el adaptador de la Estación Espacial Internacional. Es el adaptador ruso con el estadounidense. Y este es el estadounidense, el adaptador estadounidense.
¿Y ese acoplamiento lo hacen los
tripulantes? Lo hacen, ellos solos.
¿Y cómo se hace cuando se retorna la nave espacial, el cohete sin tripulante?
Ahí se hace con el control de misión.
Muy bien.
Porque tienen un chip para que mueva. Si es con tripulantes no tienes el chip, pero es sin tripulación y tienes el chip. No, sí tienes el chip. Ahí está. Ahí está. Ahí está. Cámaras de la Estación Espacial Internacional. Cámaras de la ISS. Cámaras de la ISS.
Station, even though we are in an orbital nighttime and it's pretty dark, that's exciting to see how close these spacecraft are to each other.
Yeah, now just about 4 meters away. Standing by for the call for CHOP, crew hands-off point.
Ahí está la cámara de la ISS. Ahí está. ¡Uy! El RCS. ¡Uy! Se está acoplando. Sí, ya se acopló. Se acopló. Sí, ahí. Sí. Se acopló. Ahí está. Se acopló. ¡Ay, ay, ay! ¡Se acopló! ¡Se acopló! ¡Se acopló, no! ¡Ay! ¿Oh, sí?
SpaceX on the big loop, soft capture confirmed.
¡Sí, se acopló!
Seguro, creo que todavía no.
Oh, sí, se acopló, sí, se acopló.
Crew 9 has arrived to the International Space Station. Docking confirmed at 4:30 p.m. Central Time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time over Botswana.
Se acopló, se acopló.
Now we still have a few steps to complete before Dragon is
¿dónde
securely
sacan
attached
esas
to the
cámaras?
station. So we're going to go
¿Dónde
ahead and follow
las
those
sacan
along as
esos
well.
programas y esas cámaras?
Están instaladas en la...
We are standing by
¿no?
for the hard capture
Ahí
sequence
está.
to start.
Se abre la escotilla en una hora.
Pero ya acopló perfectamente.
Se acopló perfectamente y se abre la escotilla en una hora. Se acopló perfectamente a la ICE. Llevan 50 segundos de acoplo.
Parece que todavía...
Sí. Ya se acopló.
Again, they're referencing the soft capture ring that will slowly retract and
Un
bring
minuto de
Dragon
acoplo.
closer to the International Space Station. We'll get into that hard capture
Está
sequence
bien
with the
acoplado
hooks
ahora.
and latches, providing us a hard docking, and that happens about 10 minutes after docking itself. Again,
Y
Crew
se
9
abre la
arriving at the
escotilla
International Space
en una
Station
hora.
as
Sí.
the station and Dragon were flying about 265 statute miles over Botswana, 4:30 p.m. Central Time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Of course, those hard capture rings aren't the only thing that we're going to attach between Dragon
Sí,
and
esta
Space
es de
Station.
la
We also
NASA.
have a series
De
of
la NASA.
umbilicals and other systems
Son
that
cabras de la
really help
NASA.
integrate Dragon to the space station once both vehicles are
No
made
sé por qué se
together.
les ocurre
This
esto a la
continues to
NASA.
be
Los
a
especialistas de misión son
not,
muy
I wouldn't want to say
importantes.
slow, but a methodical process of bringing the
En
crew
serio,
on board the space station.
deberían
So
ser
yes, we do
7
consider them
asientos.
docked at this point. We
Antes
are
SpaceX
awaiting for that
había
hard dock to be confirmed.
optimizado para 7
But we will
asientos.
still have a couple of hours before we actually open the hatch and see the crew
No sé,
fly
pero
through. So
había
NASA
optimizado para
astronaut
7
Jeanette F on the
asientos.
space station side is going to be Prime. She's the
Pero la NASA había
lead for
optado por 4.
pressurizing the vestibule, that space between Dragon and the station hatch. That will be opened and allow the crew members to fly through it and join their new home for the next 5 months. So we will stand by for that, but that does take a couple of hours, and then we will finally have 11 people aboard the International Space Station for about the next week.
Esperamos a que se acerque
Has
la
been an
hora para
exciting
la
time to be on
apertura de la
station.
escotilla.
Obviously, at this point, everything we're doing, as you mentioned, is very methodical, and that's because we're still in a dynamic phase of flight before we have all 11 members of our crew together on board Expedition 72. We've obviously heard a couple call-outs to our crew that they are wearing their IVA suits now, visors down, due to the dynamic nature of this flight environment, and we'll move through all of these steps until we can bring everybody together, and then, like you mentioned earlier, maybe change into something that's a little bit less spacefaring, a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, we'll probably see them float through in something like their flight suits. You know, NASA astronauts typically wear blue flight suits, so we'll see what they show up in today. But I'm definitely looking forward to seeing them float through the hatch. Now again, we.
Ahí. Ah, no pasa nada. Sí, no pasa nada.
No, y corresponde todo a la NASA, entonces no.
Sí, le corresponde todo a la NASA. Sí, le corresponde todo a la NASA. Sí, no hay nada de SpaceX con la Cruz 9. No sé por qué habían como la Cruz 6 que se había que le pasaron por SpaceX. 1 hora para el acoplo. Muy bien. Dale.
Tenemos High Definition View.
De la Estación Espacial Internacional.
Ahora no tenemos luz.
Dale, esa no. Esa. Y ahí vemos la Cruz Dragon.
No solo esos dos vivos.
¿Por dónde estarán pasando?
Ahora sí.
Acá. Listo. ¿Está hablando del control de misión?
So confirmation that the soft capture ring, that first step in the docking process, has completely retracted. We will soon move into the hard capture process. Sounds like they're standing by for reconfiguration before doing so. But you can hear that the crew on Dragon are still speaking with the core here in Hawthorne, the crew operations resource engineer. So once they float into the hatch, though, they really become Expedition 72 crew members, not just Crew 9 crew members. And they will start communicating almost solely with the flight director
Seguimos con la vista de los dos tripulantes.
Uno ruso y otro español.
As what we have here in
Hasta la
Hawthorne with
próxima.
the core. That's the single person in the room that communicates with the crew. That keeps